The crack of a breaking branch snapped through the night and jerked Travis Miller awake. He lay still, listening. Another crack, then the heavy thud of apples hitting the ground. Something big was in his orchard again. His chest tight, he swung his legs out of bed, pulled on jeans and boots, and took the shotgun from beside the closet. He did not chamber around. On the porch, the cold air bit at his face. The weak bulb above the door threw a pale circle over the yard, but beyond the truck and the old tractor, the apple trees were only dark shapes. From somewhere in the middle rows came the scrape of claws on bark and the steady sound of heavy breathing. That bear is back, he thought. 3 mornings in a row had told him this was no wind and no raccoon. At first light, he had walked the rows with a cooling coffee mug in his hand, counting busted branches and half-eaten fruit. Deep paw prints pressed into the soft ground. Bark stripped in fresh scars. The lower part of the fence shoved in like cardboard. This orchard was not a hobby. It was how he paid the bank. The second day, Hank had rolled up in his dusty pickup. He climbed out, glanced at the trees, and shook his head. "Heard you got a visitor," he said. "Big one, from the tracks. Broke 3 branches off that gala back there," Travis answered. "Took out part of the fence." Hank whistled. "Once a bear learns there is free food," he said, "he does not forget. Lights and pans will not fix that. You either deal with him, or the state will. And when they step in, it gets ugly." "I am not about to start shooting at shadows," Travis said. "You wait long enough and the shadows get closer to your front porch," Hank replied. "Your orchard or some wild animal. That is the choice." The words sat heavy long after Hank drove off. That night, Travis called the ranger station. Wyatt Collins picked up, voice steady. "Wyatt here. This is Travis Miller out on Old Creek Road," Travis said. "I think I've got a bear working my apples." Wyatt listened while Travis described the tracks and the damage. Then he asked what he needed to ask. Any livestock hit? Any sign it was testing doors or sheds? Anyone scared off the porch? "No," Travis said. "Just the trees." "Then we are still ahead," Wyatt said. "Start with lights and noise, maybe a camera. I will swing by tomorrow and look. But if this turns into a threat to people, or if somebody files a formal complaint, I have to act. That is the job." "By act you mean move it, or worse," Travis said. "Sometimes relocation works," Wyatt replied. "Sometimes it does not." After he hung up, Travis walked the fence line with a flashlight, breathing in the damp smell of soil and leaves. He had grown up hearing stories about problem animals that ended with one loud shot and a quiet truck ride. Those stories had always bothered him more than he admitted. Now, in the middle of the night, he stood at the porch rail again, listening to his orchard being taken apart in the dark. He clicked off the porch light so his eyes could adjust and stepped down into the yard. The dirt was cold under his boots. Crickets had gone silent. The sounds from the trees were clearer now, a mix of rustling and the sharp snap of wood under weight. Travis moved slowly, keeping the truck between himself and the orchard until the dark settled into shapes. His heart thumped in his throat. Every few steps he stopped to listen. The shotgun hung low in his hands, barrel pointed at the ground. Between the 3rd and 4th rows, something massive shifted. A wide, dark shape rose up beside one of the trees, taller than any man, just a deeper piece of night against the sky. The tree shuddered as it leaned into the branches. Apples dropped in a quick, uneven drumbeat. "There you are," he thought. He could hear the bear breathing, a deep, steady sound. His fingers tightened on the stock, but he did not lift the gun. Hank's voice rolled through his mind. "Your orchard or some wild animal. That is the choice." Instead of backing away, Travis slid 1 foot forward, then another. He stayed to the side of the row, trying to stay downwind. The shotgun stayed low. The bear dropped back to all fours and turned its head toward the far edge of the orchard. Travis saw it reach down, pick something from the ground, and start moving toward the back fence where the land dipped into the black line of pines. He could turn around, go back inside, call Wyatt in the morning, and hand this off. He could pretend he never saw how calmly the animal moved through his trees. Instead, he drew in a breath and stepped between the last 2 rows, just far enough to keep the dark bulk in sight. Fallen apples rolled under his boots. At the end of the orchard, the bear slipped past the sagging fence and into the shadows under the pines. For a heartbeat, Travis stood alone among the trees, staring at the gap where it vanished. Then he did the one thing he had promised himself he would not do. He climbed over the fence and followed the bear toward the woods, letting the dark swallow him and the sound of its heavy steps. Travis stepped past the last row of trees, and the orchard dropped away behind him. The house light faded to a smeared glow. Ahead, the bear moved with slow, steady strides, a darker lump inside the dark. Something hung from its mouth. He heard the soft bump of apples knocking together when it shifted its head. He kept well back, close enough to keep it in view, far enough not to crowd it. The shotgun lay in his hands, barrels down, safety on. The flashlight in his pocket stayed there. A bright beam across that heavy back might turn all this into a fast, bloody mess. As his eyes adjusted, the shapes around him turned from solid black to rough outlines of pine, fir, and bare-limbed maple. Low branches brushed his sleeves. Once his boot slid on a root, and he went down on one knee. He held his breath and listened. The bear did not change pace. It pushed through the undergrowth like this was a path it knew by heart. Travis followed the sounds as much as the shape, tracking the rustle of brush, the snap of small twigs, the faint click of claws on stone. The air smelled of damp soil and crushed needles, with a thin thread of sweet fruit drifting back toward him. "You are out of your mind," he whispered. Still, his feet moved. The ground began to fall away. Somewhere ahead, water moved over rock in a steady, low hiss. The bear angled down toward the sound and walked along the side of a shallow ravine. Travis slowed. One bad slide here, and Wyatt would be finding a broken farmer at the bottom instead of a live one on the phone. Under his soles, he felt a wide, packed track where heavy weight had passed many times. His boot nudged something soft. In the thin gray light from the sky, he saw half a crushed apple ground into the mud. The bear reached the bottom first. It stopped at the base of a leaning oak that pushed out over the creek. Thick roots clawed out of the bank and left a hollow under them, a dark pocket of space. Travis eased down the last few feet, one hand on a sapling. He slid in behind a clump of brush and went still. From there he saw the animal not as a rumor, but as a body. The fur along its shoulders was patchy and rough. Its sides rose and fell fast, as if every breath had to work for space. It did not look like an overfed raider from a campground. It looked worn thin. The bear lowered its head and set the apples at the edge of the hollow. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then something shifted in that dark space, a smaller shape dragging forward. A cub crawled out. It was smaller than he expected, ribs lined under its fur, head too big for its body. Its front leg was pulled tight against its chest. In the weak light, he saw a raw patch where fur should have been, edges dark and stiff with dried blood. The little bear limped the last foot and stopped with its nose almost touching the fruit. It did not grab for the food. It waited as if the decision was not up to it. The big bear, he understood now it was a sow, made a low sound in her chest, nothing like a roar, more like a short hum. The cub dropped its head and began to eat in quick, hard bites, as if afraid the apples might vanish if it slowed down. Travis felt his jaw clench. In his orchard, he had seen broken branches, torn bark, and numbers on a page. Down here, under the oak, it was harder to call any of this simple theft. It looked like a parent hauling groceries to a kid who could barely stand. The sow stepped in close and began to lick along the injured leg. The cub flinched once, then leaned into her, belly working as it chewed. The wound was ugly but not fresh. Whatever had done it, wire, metal, a fall, had done it days ago. Without food, the small body had nothing to fight with. He shifted his weight to keep his foot from going numb. A dry stick snapped under his boot. The crack shot through the ravine. The cub froze with an apple piece in its mouth. The sow's head came up so fast he barely saw the movement. One moment, she was bent over the leg. The next, she was staring straight toward his hiding place. A piece of cloud slid away from the moon. Faint light caught on her eyes. They locked on him. Travis did not move. His hands crushed the shotgun stock, but the barrel stayed pointed at the ground. His heart slammed against his ribs, loud as the creak. Every part of him yelled to back up or run. He stayed where he was. The bear huffed once, a sharp breath that steamed in the cold air. Then she swung sideways and set herself between him and the hollow. Her shoulders filled the gap between the roots. Behind her, he saw the cub flatten against the oak, barely more than a shadow. "I am not here to hurt you," he thought. The words were useless, but he heard them anyway. Out loud, he said, very low, "Easy. I am leaving." He tilted the barrels even farther toward the dirt and took one slow step back. Brush scraped his jacket. He kept his eyes on her. letting her track every inch he moved. Nothing happened. He took another step. Another. The sow held her ground, a solid shape against the roots. She did not lunge. She did not turn to flee. She simply stayed there until the brush and trees hid her from view. At the first line of pines, he stopped and looked back down. From there, he saw only the curve of the oak and the faint shine of water. The bears were somewhere in that patch of dark, close and silent. He turned and climbed. The way up felt steeper than the way down. His legs shook now that the flood of fear had somewhere to drain. By the time he saw the sagging fence at the edge of the orchard, the sky behind his house had shifted from black to dull gray. He slipped through the gap and crossed the rows, hardly seeing the fruit on the ground. Apples lay scattered in the grass, round and wet with dew. A few hours ago, they had been numbers in his head, boxes for a buyer, pieces of a mortgage payment. Now he pictured a thin cub dropping its head over one of them like it was medicine. Inside, the quiet of the house hit him as hard as the night air had. He racked the shotgun back in its place with careful hands and filled a mug from the coffee pot, though he did not remember setting it up. The clock on the stove said dawn was close. He stood at the counter, fingers wrapped around the warm ceramic, and heard Hank in his head again. Your orchard or some wild animal? That is the choice. It did not sound clean anymore. It sounded like a line with a bank on one side and a broken family on the other. His phone buzzed on the table. The sound made him jump harder than the stick had in the ravine. The screen lit the dim kitchen. Wyatt Collins flashed on it. Travis stared at the name, then answered. Morning, Travis, Wyatt said. I have already had a couple of calls about a bear working the orchards out your way. Thought I would check with you first. Morning light pushed through the kitchen window, thin and gray. Travis sat at the table with a mug that had gone cold hours ago. He had not slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the hollow under the oak, the cub's ribs, the mother's eyes catching his. The phone call still echoed in his head. Wyatt had said he would stop by. That meant he was already on his way. Outside, a truck engine rumbled up the gravel drive. A second later came the crunch of tires and the slam of a door. Travis rose, rubbed his face, and stepped onto the porch. Wyatt Collins was halfway up the steps, his Ranger jacket zipped halfway, clipboard under one arm. He looked the same as always, calm, careful, the kind of man who had learned to keep his face neutral in other people's trouble. Morning, Wyatt said. Morning, Travis replied. Mind if I come in? They went inside. Wyatt set his clipboard on the counter and looked out the back window toward the orchard. The rows of trees gleamed with dew. Broken branches still leaned at odd angles. So, he said, I have 2 complaints from neighbors about a bear in this area. Hank called first thing, said he saw big tracks near your fence again. And he mentioned hearing shots last week in another valley. You had any contact? Travis shook his head. Not the way he means. Wyatt studied him. You sound like a man who knows more than he's saying. Travis leaned on the counter, palms flat. He told himself there was no use hiding it. If he stayed quiet, they would send someone from the district, and the outcome would be written before anyone even looked. I followed her, he said finally. Wyatt blinked. Followed her. Last night. Into the woods. Wyatt sighed through his nose. You were lucky you were standing here telling me that. What did you see? A pause. Then Travis said, a mother and a cub. The cub's hurt. Bad leg. She was bringing food to it. Wyatt straightened. That's not a story I hear often. I saw it. Apples from my own trees. She set them down, and the cub came out. Could barely stand. Wyatt crossed his arms. You sure it was a cub, not a yearling? We have had males around that size. Travis shook his head. This one was small, thin. It was a cub. Wyatt exhaled. By protocol, a bear that keeps coming to human food sources is a problem. If it's teaching its cub the same habit, it's double trouble. He glanced at Travis. You know what happens when it gets reported officially. They relocate, Travis said. If we are lucky, Wyatt answered. If not, they put it down. The silence filled the room. Outside, a crow screamed from the fence post. Travis looked at his hands. I can't let that happen. She wasn't dangerous, Wyatt. She saw me. I thought she might charge, but she didn't. She just stood there between me and the cub, like she was telling me to stay back, not to fight. Wyatt looked toward the orchard again, jaw tight. I don't make the rules. I just try to keep people safe. And if nobody files a formal report? Travis asked. Wyatt turned back slowly. That's not exactly how it works. But it could be, Travis said. I'll reinforce the fence. Move part of the crop to the edge near the woods. Leave it for her there so she doesn't come close to the house. I'll put up motion lights. I'll keep watch. No one else has to know." Wyatt hesitated. "You're asking me to look the other way. I'm asking you not to make her a case number. She's not a threat. She's just trying to keep that cub alive." Wyatt drummed his fingers on the counter. "You understand what you're taking on. If there's an incident, property damage, injury, this all comes back to you." "I know." Wyatt studied him for a long moment, then took off his cap and rubbed his forehead. "Hank's going to keep calling," he said. "The man's already angry about losing fruit to raccoons. You'll have to calm him down before he makes this worse." Travis nodded. "I'll handle Hank." Wyatt looked out toward the road. Finally he said, "All right. I can file this as a preliminary check. No active threat observed. No formal complaint yet. That buys us time. But if anything changes, I'll have no choice." "Fair enough," Travis said. Wyatt gave him a level look. "I'm trusting you on this. Don't make me regret it." He turned toward the door, then stopped halfway. "Whatever you saw last night, it doesn't make it easier, but it does make it real. These animals aren't villains, Travis. They're just doing what they can to make it through." Travis managed a small nod. "That's all any of us are doing." Wyatt's truck started down the road a minute later. Travis stood on the porch watching the dust rise behind it. The orchard looked peaceful now, but every tree reminded him of what waited in the ravine. Hank's voice cut across the quiet. He was coming up from his own property, face red, boots stomping through the grass. "You talked to the ranger?" Hank shouted. "You tell him to do his damn job?" Travis held his ground. "We talked. And he's giving me time to fix the fence." Hank's eyes narrowed. "Time? That bear's out there raising another thief. You wait till it shows up at your porch and then tell me about time." Travis said evenly, "It's not going to happen." Hank spat into the dirt. "You'll regret that." Then he turned and walked off, muttering under his breath. Travis watched him go, then turned toward the line of trees. The morning breeze stirred the leaves, whispering over the rows. He thought of the cub again, its head bent over a bruised apple, and knew there was no turning back from what he'd promised. Somewhere deep in the woods, far beyond the fence, a low call rolled through the air, soft, distant, but alive. It made the hairs on his arms lift. He stood there listening until it faded into the sound of the wind. Travis spent the next day with a tape measure in one hand and a post driver in the other. The old wire fence that sagged along the back of the orchard had never been meant to stop anything heavier than a stray cow. Now he set thicker posts and pulled woven wire tight until it sang when he plucked it. By noon, sweat ran down his back despite the cool air. His arms shook each time he lifted the driver. He kept seeing the hollow under the oak, the thin cub trying to stand on 3 legs. He ran an extra line of wire higher than before and fastened small bells to it. If she pushed here again, he wanted to hear it before she got close to the trees. That evening, as the light drained out of the sky, he carried 2 buckets of bruised apples past the new fence. He walked another 30 yards toward the tree line and dumped them in a shallow dip where the woods began. "You take these," he muttered. "Leave the rest alone." For 3 nights the bells stayed quiet. Motion lights flashed once at a deer, then not at all. The apples by the trees disappeared each morning, cores and stems scattered in the grass, prints stamped into the soft soil heading back toward the ravine. On the 4th evening, a familiar truck turned up the drive. Emily stepped out, kids piling after her. Max went for the tire swing. Lily stuck to her side, eyeing the orchard. "So this is where the famous apples come from," Emily said. "Something like that," he answered. They sat on the steps while the kids ran in the yard. He told her about the bear, the ranger, Hank yelling for someone to get rid of it. He did not mention following the sow into the dark. Emily listened, then said, "And instead of asking them to shoot it, you are building fences and leaving food at the edge of the woods?" "It has got a cub," he said. "It is thin. I can lose some apples. I cannot watch them kill her just because we planted here." Emily nudged his shoulder. "This is what Dad meant when he said the land was not really ours." "Maybe," Travis said. "Or maybe I am just tired of things dying because it is easier for us." "Both," she answered. "I am proud of you." "Do not be yet," he said. "It might blow up in my face." The days slid by in small tasks. He picked for market, checked the bells and the fence each morning, walked the rows for fresh damage, and found none. Each evening, just before dark, he carried out another bucket of apples and left it in the same place by the trees. Once, at dusk, he saw her. a dark shape at the edge where the last row met the shadow of the pines. She moved in, nose low, then eased forward to the pile. Travis watched from the middle of the orchard, still as a stump. The sow gathered apples in her mouth, clumsy but determined, then turned and slipped back toward the ravine. She never came near the fence. The bells did not ring. Maybe this can work, he thought. On a Friday evening, the sky went heavy and low. Emily had taken the kids back to town. Travis finished loading crates into the truck for an early market run and locked the barn. The orchard lay quiet. He was halfway across the yard when the sound ripped through the air. A single shot, flat and hard, from the direction of Hank's property. Travis stopped so fast his boots threw dirt. For a second his brain refused to connect the noise to anything. Then his stomach turned. No, he said out loud. He dropped the keys and ran. Past the barn, past the last row of trees, toward the narrow track over the low ridge between his place and Hank's back field. The ground rose and then fell away. Branches whipped his arms. Another sound cut through the evening, the thin, broken bawl of an animal in pain. It came from the woods beyond Hank's pasture. He pushed harder, lungs burning. At the top of the rise, he saw Hank's rear fence and the open gate. Beyond it, a strip of field and then trees closing in. Hank was nowhere in sight. Travis vaulted the fence and followed the sound into the timber. The light dropped fast under the canopy. He moved toward a small clearing he knew from hunting season. The smell hit him before he stepped out. Sharp metal, fresh and raw. He broke through the last brush and stopped. The grass in the middle of the clearing was mashed flat in a wide circle. Deep claw marks scored one of the saplings at the edge, bark ripped away. On the ground, near the center, a dark splash soaked into the leaves and soil. Blood. It was not a pool, more a chain of drops and smears, as if something had staggered, turned, pushed off. Beside it lay a brass shell casing, half buried where a boot had ground it down. Travis knelt and picked it up. The metal was still faintly warm. He turned slowly, scanning the tree line. No bear, no cub, no body. At the far side of the clearing, the ferns were crushed low in a straight line, leading into deeper dark between the pines. On a rock halfway down that trail, he saw a fresh red smear. Whatever Hank had hit, it had not died here. The evening swallowed the last of the light. The woods around him felt too big, too quiet. He stood in the trampled circle, shell casing in his fist, eyes fixed on the bloody path disappearing into the trees, and knew that whatever choice he thought he had made was gone. Travis moved through the trees, shell casing in hand. The faint blood trail slid downhill, branches cracking beneath his boots. From the dark, a light cut through. Wyatt's voice followed. "Travis, you out here?" "Over here," Travis called. Wyatt appeared, saw the blood, crouched. "Still warm," he said. "Let's find them." They followed the trail until a faint cry rose from beneath a fallen log. Wyatt knelt, lifting his flashlight. A cub lay half-hidden, breathing fast. The front leg was torn, but not broken. No sign of the mother. Wyatt pressed his jacket against the wound. "You got your phone?" he asked. Travis handed it over. Wyatt called the wildlife rehab unit, gave coordinates, and said, "Small bear cub, stable, mother near." "We'll stay." "She's close," Travis whispered. Wyatt nodded. "She knows we're here." A low rumble came from the ridge. They froze, lights off. Travis glimpsed her silhouette between trees, massive, still, watching. Wyatt murmured, "She knows we're helping." Half an hour later, the sow was gone. The team arrived, lifted the cub gently, and drove off into the night. Travis asked, "Think she'll find him?" Wyatt shrugged. "Maybe, but you gave them a chance." At dawn, Hank's truck pulled up. He climbed out, eyes tired. "I wasn't aiming for the cub," he muttered. "She came through the field. I fired to scare her." Travis said quietly, "It's done. Let's keep it that way." Hank nodded, almost ashamed, then drove off. Years later, autumn filled the orchard again. Travis, older now, worked slower, leaving the back rows untouched. A quiet offering he never mentioned. One evening, he carried apples to the edge of the woods. A creak sounded in the shadows. Then he saw it. A tall bear with dark fur and a pale scar across its shoulder. It stopped, watching him without fear. He nodded once. The bear turned and slipped back into the trees. Travis stood still, wind moving through the branches. He bit into an apple, smiling. Sometimes, he thought, what you save finds its way back.